Hello everyone, welcome back to Omegon 2 Electric Boogaloo. Today I want to talk about the morality police. In some areas of the world they're also known as the Guidance Patrol, a way of ensuring the people are adhering to the structures, the norms, the culture and so on. Something which many of us in the West find quite fascinating. If you already have a legal system, why have a moral system as well? And who is the arbiter of morality? That is where a big issue arises. What I thought I'd do is tell you what the morality police are and what they do, and then go through why it is they have featured quite heavily in the news for the better part of 6 months. The morality police enforce social behaviors and regulations in the Islamic Republic in accordance with the government's interpretation of Islamic law. For instance, wearing a hijab became mandatory in Iran after its 1979 Islamic Revolution. Mahmoud Amiri Moghadam, an Oslo, Norway-based Iranian human rights activist, said that the morality police program was established in 2006 to help formalize and cement the government's rules for a new generation of Iranians who were born after the revolution and had access to the internet, and thus the outside world, which could in turn pollute them. This sounds like the Amish, but not. In the sense of, we must protect our community, but unlike the Amish, I don't think you let them have the freedom to try it for a little bit. If I've got my interpretation of what it means to be Amish wrong, I am really sorry. I've just got quite the soft spot for the Meadowlark Log Home YouTube channel. Mahmoud said they realized they needed to be more organized, to have more of a legal and visible basis for this oppression. Both men and women make up the morality police, and they patrol Iran's streets and parks in distinctive green and white vans. They can issue warnings, citations, fines, and make arrests. Though enforcement is often uneven and arbitrary, the morality police have not been actively involved in policing and recent protests. That has fallen to a plethora of Iranian security services, including a paramilitary unit known as the Basij, whatever they're called. Twats, let's call them that. We here on this channel fully support one's right to protest. It's just a shame many governments, even governments in my own country, are doing their darndest to try and find ways to prevent it from ever happening. Or strikes. That's more of an American thing though. Over the years, many people in Iran have started to rebel. They don't like being controlled. That is human nature though. They do not like to be controlled. They want to be able to express themselves, but also express their devotion to their faith without having to adhere so strictly to things they do not fully agree with. Morality is, as stated in the article, arbitrary and enforced unevenly because they themselves are basing it on their own bias, the individual who makes up the morality police, the guidance patrol, because they themselves don't adhere to strict rules. So understandably, it has become a bit of a cat and mouse game with authorities, because many have started to take off, women especially, their headscarves, a symbol to them of oppression. Some might say in their other countries, oh, but it's not oppression here, it is a symbol of oppression in Iran. Try not to get off topic or deflect too heavily, or make this about yourself. There have been videos that have been going around for a few years now of people burning their headscarves in other countries. I think Iran might be one of them. To them, it is a symbol of control, and it is stated as such because the morality police seeks to make people obey those in charge, because Ahmadinejad didn't do a bad enough job of oppressing the people when he was president. I have often said that many religions need to go through a form of revolution to keep up with the rest of the world. Iran's way around it is to say, but if we control the people and what they can and cannot wear, what they can and cannot do, what they can and cannot say, think, then totally we will have the upper hand. Forgetting human nature time and time again is to rebel against any one individual or groups of individuals who seek to solely control, which by definition will stagnate an entire population. Have you not seen what happens in North Korea, where it is akin to that of a cult of personality? In the case of Iran, it seems like projection by using an interpretation of faith to do the exact same thing. On the 4th of December 2022, the Daily Mail published an article titled "Iran Abolishes Morality Police After 2 months of protests that were triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini." 2 months ago, Amini was arrested by the Guidance Patrol. On the 16th of September 2022, she passed away. A coroner's report had stated that her death was not caused by blows to the head and limbs, but instead linked her death to pre-existing medical conditions and that she had passed away from multiple organ failure caused by cerebral hypoxia. No one believes that for a second, and since then, up till present, more than 300 people have been killed in protests that was sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini. For the best part of 2 months, these protests have been intense, and they have not shown any sign of relenting. Younger people who are vastly more in tune with the times, deciding that the time of this type of control needs to come to an end. Iran's Attorney General, Mohammad Jafar Montazeri, said that the morality police have nothing to do with the judiciary, also saying that the Iranian parliament is considering removing law that makes wearing a hijab mandatory, which on the face of it sounds quite interesting. However, others have been right to point out what Mohammed said actually is slightly mixed messagey. So the following day, via The Guardian, Iranian shopkeepers and lorry drivers staged a walkout in nearly 40 cities and towns after calls for a 3-day nationwide general strike from protesters as the government declined to confirm a claim by a senior official that the morality police had been abolished. Iranian newspapers reported an increase in patrols, especially in religious cities that require women to wear the hijab, and shop managers being directed by the police to reinforce these restrictions. Government officials are adamant that the protests are over, but they have admitted many shops have been shut, blaming intimidation, believing that this would lead to criminal charges, so they shut their shops to protect their business. At the same time, senior politicians, including the president and parliament speaker, said they'll visit Tehran universities to debate reforms with the striking students, a tactic that in the past failed, like grunge trying to defeat the metal, until it hit the back of Cobain's skull. The controversial remark that Mohammad Jafar Montazeri made was that the morality police have been shut down from where they were set up, adding they had nothing to do with the judiciary would continue to monitor behavioural actions at the community level. So essentially, the Daily Mail is wrong. Iran's official authorities have not yet formally reacted to the controversy, but it should also be pointed out Mohammad Jafar Montazeri has nothing to do with the morality police, as that is policed by a completely different wing of the government. Interestingly though, because of the protests, something positive is coming out of this. Firstly, more people are talking about Iran and women's rights. Fundamental freedoms, in fact, for all people in Iran. The second is, and this is courtesy of a journalist from Tehran, the security forces and the police are all focused on suppressing the protests, so they don't have the resources to use to deal with women without veils. The guidance patrol in the form we used to see in the streets has completely disappeared and does not exist. On one of the days of demonstrations in Tehran, I passed through the IRGC guard forces without hijab. They only looked at me. Their looks were furious, but they had no other interaction. However, it should be added the paramilitary forces were still active at night, and probably more so outside Tehran. In one particular place, a women's rights activist says that she has not seen the so-called guidance patrol forces and cars in the last 2.5 months. When enough people protest against your regime and your forces are stretched thin, your options are limited, and only when desperate, you can consider 2 options: an extreme measure that you really shouldn't, or the one that works for everyone, where you work with the people for the people. A novel idea that no politician in their right mind would ever do, but it is an option that one should consider, especially when the generation you are suppressing is the younger generation that Ahmadinejad desperately wanted to control when he created the morality police. Sadly, when it comes to making the right decision, Iran are not making the right decision. Human rights activist Mohsen Shekari was subjected to a show trial without any due protest, and has become the first executed protester convicted over anti-government unrest, as it has been thusly dubbed. He was unalived via hanging after being found guilty by a revolutionary court. Not going to pretend to pronounce the name, we're going to go with the translation of enmity against God, which the state media reported on. He was accused of being a rioter who blocked a main road in Tehran in September and wounding a member of a paramilitary force with a machete. I will add to this a final thing, that there are many articles that cover whether or not you can reform the morality police. The answer, the prevailing agreement is, no, you cannot reform it. It would be better to abolish it. How one does that, I'm not sure. Many countries violate human rights on a regular basis, and controlling with morality being subjective and arbitrary and biased is a fantastic way of demonstrating that you do not have rights. Because apparently your belief system, as interpreted by your regime of a government, means you do not deserve any of them, something which I cannot for even a moment agree with.